Thank the heavens for public domain. So, the first thing that jumps out, of course, is this thread, which consists of, it's chopped up into 8 different screen caps, is addressed to Seb the Dweeb, yours truly, that would be me. So, we have to take into consideration that we have this guy who does not look like a dweeb or faggot in the least, calling this good-looking European gentleman a dweeb. That's a cap taken from a speech, from a YouTube speech about 2 years ago. I think the naughty finger wagging is good for this for this video. So, but getting back to what's going on here. First of all, I wasn't gloating, and for those of you who are viewing this, it's necessary to view the post that Mr. Macro is referring to. That'd be this one. Now, as you can see, it's being removed, but I'll get to that in a few seconds. First of all, it should be known that the individual in question here is Chris Creighton, who committed suicide. Word came out the end of the month. I think it was July 30th, Saturday evening and around there. And on the Sunday, the very next day, I actually had a telephone conversation with Mr. Creighton's best friend, which these dorks who are about to be introduced to you don't know. And I was made aware of the following, that at that point in time, a forensics team had already been going through Mr. Creighton's basement suite for 3 days. They were blown over when they first broke in by the smell of ether, which means that Mr. Creighton was probably cooking a bit of a meth lab. It was not known at that time how long he had been hanging off his ceiling. He hung himself. It was his landlord who finally discovered him. So in other words, Mr. Creighton blew through an insurance settlement of several $100,000 in the span of about 2 years. So no amount of Nazi bowling trophies on the shelf saved him. And I doubt very much that he went to Valhalla. It's unfortunate. It's sad. But this guy offed himself. The most self-centered, cowardly act. I don't think it was a noble death in the least. So I wasn't gloating. I was merely commenting on it. Now, as you'll notice, this was reported. And, of course, there's an agenda at work here. How do I know it was reported? Well, I have this cap to fall back on, where Mr. Macro basically says, this is what these guys have got in for me. I am now into my 4th straight month of getting banned, 30-day bans, with about a day in between each ban. So that will total up to 120 days. Philip Sudovsky, quote unquote, who's been flagging my post, is actually this guy. His name is Clayton Elmy. He's in Toronto. Nice little Milo Yiannopoulos touch on the hair with the bleach. Doesn't look at all like a faggot. Not in the least. Now you have to understand that both Mr. Macro and Mr. Elmy were involved with the NSPNA US and the NSPNA Canada, respectively. Mr. Macro was the chairman. Mr. Elmy was a director, and they both fucked off after the London Forum speech when they hooked up with the infamous Dr. Greggy Johnson. So, getting back to the first cap of the thread, no, I wasn't really wallowing, I was just reporting. And this thing on my being an autistic, well, this is part of the the framing that's going on out there. There's so much bullshit floating around, just so many lies. Uh, it stinks. It really stinks. These little sluts will stoop to anything to try to keep me off Facebook. I mean, if I'm such a crazy old bag lady, which is also part of the reframing spin or the framing spin, then why not just let me hang myself? No pun intended. With my commentary. But no. Speaking of autism, who does Mr. Macro flip the balance of the funds left in the NSPNA's US's account when he shuts down the Traditionalist Worker Party? Like, give me a fucking break already. So, this whole thing goes back to the London Forum speech when things started unraveling and when this alliance really moved into another level and gear. Anyone who wishes can look into this article that I wrote, The Stench of Betrayal. It'll be found at vanguardrenaissance.com, and that will give you all of the stinking, unseemly background on this shit. On to the next slide. Mr. Sean Seamus makes an appearance, claiming that Chris Creighton was a really good guy. He only suffered severe depression. Well, on the latter, he didn't hold a monopoly. And as for really good guy, hey, he was a drunk. He was a junkie. Living in the fantasy land of thinking that he was a National Socialist. There are thousands of Chris Creightons out there in the white nationalist quote-unquote movement. It amazes me, These fucking victims. They need to come down off their crosses so that someone can beat them with it. Danny Knowles manages to get up off the floor long enough to enter Seb Lives Matter. Although, you have to admit, that's good. That's funny. Okay, Danny, go back and sleep on the floor. And then we have this thing called Eric Zikos. He's a real Nazi. He says so. Ladies and gentlemen, you connect your own dots. Probably sitting on the floor naked, masturbating in his own feces as he wrote that. Unquote. This is a reflection of the American, of the Anglo, principled, noble, white nationalist talent pool. This speaks directly to it. Entertain your own thoughts. And Mr. Seamus, opening with my post that got taken down. At Suicide Watch at day 153, that was you who put me on that. Because I would be so distraught because a bunch of nigger traitors jammed out on the NSPNA. They fucked off. They ran away like little Jew girlies with pissy panties, having to report me once a month. Having to lodge a complaint because they're offended. Poor dears with pissy panties. That was you posted that. Macro posting that, oh well, Seb will be dead soon. We don't have to worry. No one mentions that. No one mentions the $2,500 that Creighton dangled in front of Macro's face just after he came into his settlement. No one mentions that. Or the time he went on a 3 or 4 day bender and made a total ass of himself in Facebook, claiming that he should be the leader of the NSPNA. A hopeless loser, drunk, junkie. of which the world is now one less. And I guess with the way that the thinking goes in this thread, saying so makes me the insecure piece of shit. Isn't it amazing who turns out to be the darkest nigger Judas? You children, you amateurs, are treading on dangerous ground. You don't know what you are doing. You need to be careful. How's that for insecure piece of shit?